Lord. Welcome to Victory News. It's Thursday, October the 17th, 2024. I'm Greg Stevens, along with Mike Garofalo, Fiora Hernandez, and Tim Fox. Here are a few of the stories that we're watching for you right now. The Justice Department says it will oversee voting in Portage County, Ohio. Is that a good thing? We'll talk with Western Journal's Deputy Managing Editor Josh Manning all about it. In Fulton County, Georgia's District Attorney Fani Willis isn't giving up on 6 of her original criminal counts against former President Trump. Ahead, we'll talk with U.S. Senate candidate from Arizona, Kari Lake, about this and much more. But first, let's go to Fiora Hernandez with our headlines. Fiora.
Thank you, Greg. The architect behind the October 7th terrorist attack on Israel, which killed more than 1,200 Israelis, Yahya Sinwar, is dead. The terrorist leader is one of 3 members of Hamas killed by an IDF tank blast into a building in the Gaza Strip city of Rafah. Shortly after the news broke of the killing, the Israeli defense minister posted the Bible verse Leviticus 26:7, and ye shall chase your enemies, and they shall fall before you by the sword. Vice President Kamala Harris reacted to the killing of Sinwar favorably, though her and Joe Biden's administration did not want Israel to go into Rafah, precisely where the Hamas leader was found and killed.
Hamas is decimated and its leadership is eliminated. This moment gives us an opportunity to finally end the war in Gaza.
The IDF has reported no hostages were hurt during the operation. Sinwar was the leader of Hamas in Gaza since February 2017. It is not yet clear what member of the Iranian-backed terrorist organization will step forward and take his place. The U.S. military struck Iranian-backed Houthi rebels in Yemen Wednesday night. According to the Defense Department, B-2 stealth bombers took part in the attack. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin reportedly said in a statement that the strikes were ordered by Joe Biden to degrade the Houthis' ability to target commercial and military ships in the Red Sea. They reportedly have hardened underground weapons storage locations. The B-2 is the only U.S. military plane that can carry 30,000-pound bunker buster bombs. After initially reporting violent crime had decreased in 2022, the FBI has now corrected those statistics to actually show an increase. Real Clear Investigations reported on Wednesday the Biden administration's FBI quietly revised 2022 crime data to show violent crime in America increased by 4.5%, including thousands more murders, rapes, robberies, and aggravated assaults. Compare that to the final crime data for 2022 released in September 2023, when the FBI reported the violent crime rate fell by 2.1%. University of Georgia professor David Muster, a crime researcher, told RCI, quote, "This lack of transparency harms the FBI's credibility." One Border Patrol agent claims he and others will leave in droves if Kamala Harris wins the White House in November. That is what an agent who is not even of retirement age told the New York Post this week, saying, quote, "I'm not doing this again. 4 years of hell," end quote, with another saying, "Lots of guys who can retire will go. If Trump wins, they'll stay." That agent added he believes the more seasoned veteran agents will use their skills to get other jobs. A report last May revealed that U.S. Customs and Border Protection has lost nearly a quarter of its agents since 2020. The Post-Millennial reports that suicide is also on the rise with CBP agents. That surge led to the agency hiring a sociologist to combat the problem. Another CBP agent told the New York Post, under this administration, they've done everything they could to make our job as inefficient as possible. When you're watching criminals come in and get released, it sucks. Mike?
Your Democratic presidential nominee Kamala Harris sat down on Wednesday for a 26-minute long one-on-one interview with Fox News' Bret Baier.
How many illegal immigrants would you estimate your administration has released into the country over the last 3.5 years?
Well, I'm glad you raised the issue of immigration because I agree with you. It is a topic of discussion that people want to rightly have. And you know what I'm going to talk about.
Yeah, but
right
do you
now,
just a
which
number?
is-
Do you think it's 1 million, 3?
Vice President never gave a numeric answer.
Jocelyn Nungari, Rachel Morin, Laken Riley, they are young women who were brutally assaulted and killed by some of the men who were released at the beginning of the administration, well before a negotiated bipartisan bill. Former President Clinton actually referred to Laken Riley Sunday, campaigning for you in Georgia, saying if those men had been properly vetted, Laken Riley probably would not have been killed. So if it wouldn't have happened, this is well before any negotiation. This is well before Donald Trump got involved in the politics. This is a specific policy decision by your administration to release these men into the country. So what I'm saying to you, do you owe
Brett,
those families an apology?
Let me just say, first of all, those are tragic cases. There's no question about that. There is no question about that. And I can't imagine the pain that the families of those victims have experienced.
While Kamala Harris did not offer the families a direct apology, she did say she is sorry the murders occurred. This exchange also stood out.
More than 70% of people tell the country is on the wrong track. They say the country is on the wrong track. If it's on the wrong track, that track follows 3.5 years of you being vice president and President Biden being president. That is what they're saying, 79% of them. Why are they saying that? If you're turning the page, you've been in office for 3.5 years.
And Donald Trump has been running for office.
But you've been the person holding the office.
Come on.
Madam
You
Vice
and I
President.
both know what I'm talking about. You and I both know what I'm talking about.
I actually don't. What are you talking about?
Whenever she could during her answers, the vice president turned the attention, as you heard, to attacking Donald Trump. The left-leaning Brookings Institute and Public Religion Research Institute released their 15th annual Democracy and American Values Survey Wednesday. The more than 5,000-person survey asked questions on topics playing a role in the 2024 presidential election. Joy Reid, the host of MSNBC Read Out, had this to say.
White evangelical Protestants, 75%, are the most likely to favor militarized encampments for undocumented immigrants. The majority of white Catholics, 61%. The Catholic Church is rooted in the care for the immigrant.
Then Reid added this.
33% of Hispanic Catholics favoring this policy. And I wonder, and we're booking on this on the readout, the question of whether Latinos who believe this think that your average Border Patrol official or National Guard member or police officer is going to be able to tell who is an undocumented immigrant and who isn't, because they're just going to see your color, your shade, and hear your accent.
Now, according to Joy Reid, gender would dictate if America was capable of being a fascist nation. Greg.
Interesting. Justice Department announced Tuesday that it will oversee voting in Portage County, Ohio, after the sheriff was accused of intimidating Vice President Kamala Harris supporters. Bruce Zukowski posted on social media last month that all the addresses of all the residents with Harris Wall signs in their yard should be written down so illegal immigrants could be sent to live with them. The sheriff said since the post was a little misinterpreted, the county election board voted to remove the sheriff's department from security duty from the early in-person voting. The Department of Justice announced it would monitor federal compliance with voting laws and early and in-person Election Day voting. Sheriff Zukowski told the Associated Press the DOJ monitoring voting locations was not unique to Portage County, and it was a normal practice by the Department of Justice. Well, let's bring in the Deputy Managing Editor for the Western Journal, Josh Manning. Josh, welcome to Victory News.
Thank you, Greg. Always a pleasure to be here.
Thank you, sir. The Western Journal is reporting on a geopolitical shifting story out of Israel as the IDF has killed Hamas terror chief Yahya Sinwar. Sinwar led the massacre of the Israeli citizens on October the 7th, a year ago. Where do you think this leaves Hamas strength-wise, and will this be leverage that Israel needs to bring to end the Hamas war against the Jewish people?
It leaves Hamas weakened. Certainly, Israel's decapitation strikes against Hamas leaders have been wildly successful, and we've seen what the Mossad is actually capable of a few weeks ago with the pager explosions. You don't go to war with Israel and expect to come out of it unscathed, and Hamas has been, their capabilities have been degraded. However, it's not clear that this gives Israel any leverage to end the war. Israel could end it tomorrow if they wanted to, but what's good is that Israel doesn't seem to be interested in ending it. There is only one way to establish peace, and that is complete victory by one side or the other. It looks to me like Israel and the public in Israel has finally recognized that, and I hope they have the strength of will to continue on and not just degrade Hamas, but absolutely crush it into oblivion. That is the only way that they're going to get any semblance of peace.
Well, they do have a defined goal of how to win. That's something that U.S. commanders haven't done too often. Daily Mail is reporting the Venezuelan gang TDA has now taken over at least 4 apartment complexes in San Antonio, Texas. Congressman Chip Roy went to the first complex seized by the gang, and he shared this report.
We've got violence going on in our city, violence going on in the state of Texas, TDA, where we lost Jocelyn Nungray to murder. We had a bound and gagged woman in Irving, Texas. We have a prostitution ring in El Paso. This is not acceptable. This is at the hands of Kamala Harris, at the hands of Joe Biden, at the hands of Mayorkas.
Let me remind you, the ABC News' Martha Raddatz recently tossed this threat off as a, quote, handful of incidents in Colorado. Do you think this growing threat demonstrates the safety of Americans and this should be on the ballot in November?
Yeah, absolutely. What Brett Baer asked Kamala Harris is exactly right. How many million have they let in? This is what happens when you have essentially open borders, when you have porous borders. Trump was right years ago when he said they're not sending their best, and some of them are rapists, some of them are murderers. We know that definitionally because we have seen people like Laken Riley murdered, and now we see these people setting up camp in American apartment buildings. We were laughed at when we called this an invasion, and we did it for years. Now, what else do you call it when foreign nationals come over the border and take over American property? I don't know what you call that other than an invasion.
Yeah. Bipartisan panel of law enforcement and government officials condemned the Secret Service handling of former President Trump's rally in Butler, PA. They wrote to DHS Secretary Mayorkas stating this, quote, Secret Service as an agency requires fundamental reform to carry out its mission. Without that reform, the independent review panel believes another Butler can and will happen. Josh, will this get the critical changes needed for the Secret Service in order, get it going?
I hope so. I think the takeaway from all of this is that it turns out it's actually remarkably easy to almost kill a president or a presidential candidate. I think the reason that the Secret Service had been successful in the past is because no one had actually tried. It turns out that if you try, and given the Secret Service current configuration, it's not difficult. So I hope this will lead to reforms. But the government is notorious for not reforming when it needs to. This absolutely needs to happen.
It used to be in the Treasury Department, and then they moved it over. So, Josh, thank you so much. We'll be back to you in just a moment. Mike?
Greg, conservative writer and filmmaker Chris Rufo claims to have exposed Kamala Harris for plagiarizing parts of her book, Smart on Crime, that she co-wrote back in 2009. RedState.com reports the mainstream media, led by the New York Times, said, quote, the lapses were not that serious, calling Rufo, you guessed it, a racist for revealing Harris as a plagiarist. Rufo claimed the Times withheld information from plagiarism expert Jonathan Bailey, who stated this, I want to be clear that I have not performed a full analysis of the book. My quotes were based on information provided to me by the reporters. Bailey wrote this update after receiving more details. Quote, Harris' book contained roughly 2 paragraphs copied from Wikipedia without citation. To be clear, that is plagiarism. Bailey also said the pattern points to sloppy writing habits, not a malicious intent to defraud. Republican vice presidential candidate J.D. Vance campaigned in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania earlier today. He had this reaction to Kamala Harris' interview on Fox last night.
Wow. That made me feel pretty bad. It felt bad for her, and I felt bad for every single person who was watching. Because remember, Kamala Harris, we got to remember that the entire theme of her campaign is basically her pretending that she doesn't even know who Joe Biden is. Don't pay attention to that high inflation. Don't pay attention to that wide open southern border, because Kamala Harris will tell you it's not her fault. She's never even seen Joe Biden. That's what she'll go out there and tell people.
Vance went on to say Harris says she'll fix all the problems on day one when she's already been in power for, what, over 1,400 days, Fior?
Mike, federal health authorities are pushing a layered mitigation strategy for COVID-19 as vaccine effectiveness is said to diminish within months, potentially increasing the risk of infection. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention continues to recommend vaccination, masks, and social distancing, despite little evidence that even the highest quality masks provide meaningful protection. Recent studies and reports, such as one from the Cleveland Clinic, have raised concerns about long-term heart risks following COVID infections. The clinic's study, funded by the National Institutes of Health, claimed that COVID-19 doubled the long-term risk of heart attacks, strokes, and death. Critics argue the study selectively presented data to emphasize heart risks from COVID while ignoring risks associated with the vaccines. Wisconsin has 78 ballot drop boxes across the state this election cycle, in contrast to 500 in the 2020, according to the Wisconsin Election Commission. The drop box total includes 14 in Milwaukee, 14 in Madison, and 7 in Racine. A full list of locations appears on the state's election site. Drop boxes became a hot topic after the liberal state Supreme Court allowed their use, after a more conservative court blocked the drop boxes after the 2020 election. Just the News reported as of Wednesday, more than 260,000 absentee ballots were returned of 564,000 that were mailed out and nearly 574,000 requested, compared to 2020 when 700,000 were returned and 1.3 million requested. According to Just the News, Milwaukee has seen a little under half of the 88,000 ballots requested returned. Tim?
This week, the Iredell-Statesville, North Carolina School District voted against a request to display a set of classroom posters that included the Ten Commandments. The Board of Education voted against displaying the posters of the Ten Commandments, the U.S. Constitution, and the Bill of Rights because they worried it would open them to legal trouble. However, according to a Fox News report, Stanford law professor Michael McConnell says the phrase separation of church and state, well, it never appears nowhere in the Constitution. When challenged about prayer in government and the separation of church and state, House Speaker Mike Johnson said this.
The separation of church and state is a misnomer. People misunderstand it. Of course, it comes from a phrase that was in a letter that Jefferson wrote. It's not in the Constitution. And what he was explaining is they did not want the government to encroach upon the church, not that they didn't want principles of faith to have influence on our public life. It's exactly the opposite.
The debate about religious symbols in schools is not limited to North Carolina. According to the Christian Post, Louisiana passed a law in June requiring schools to display the Ten Commandments, with the state being sued in the Interfaith group by interfaith group of parents opposed to the law soon after. Mike?
The integrity of voter rolls in the state of Rhode Island is under question. According to the Federalist, Rhode Island works with a multi-state left-leaning voter roll management system called ERIC, which reportedly focuses on adding eligible voters without checking for citizenship upon registration. Republican Congressman Pat Fallon of Texas talked to Fox News earlier this month about the importance of election integrity.
It is a major problem. We do need a solution, considering that the last election was decided by about 80,000 votes out of well over 100 million cast. There's nothing more sacrosanct in a republic than to make sure you have secure, honest, transparent, and open elections.
In respect to Rhode Island, the state acknowledges it is a felony to register to vote as a non-citizen, while at the same time maintaining it is not legal to ask for proof of citizenship status upon registration. And joining us now is former television journalist and now the Republican candidate for U.S. Senate from the great state of Arizona, Kari Lake. Kari, you and your opponent, Ruben Gallego, have a wide separation on people of faith and their place in the fabric of this nation. Tell us how you differ.
Oh my gosh, night and day on every issue, but let's talk about faith. And, Ruben Gallego, my opponent, just earned an award from the Transgender Advocacy Group. This is a guy who's been pushing the transgender ideology in our schools. He just signed a letter saying he didn't want our military to get the raises unless they pay for transgender sex change surgeries as well. And look at what he did during COVID. He voted and pushed for churches to be forced to shut down but allowed for strip joints and bars and cannabis sales to continue, but churches had to be shut down. So when it comes to that and the First Amendment, my goodness, the censorship, he doesn't respect the First Amendment, which we know is where we get our ability to practice our faith here in this country and our God-given rights. So we differ widely on many issues, from the border to I want a secure border, I want to fully fund our police. He's voted to defund the police.
You know, Carrie, last night, Kamala Harris appeared on Fox News for an unedited interview with no teleprompter. Near the end, she unloaded some charges on Donald Trump. Let's play a clip, and I'd like you to respond afterwards.
And you and I both know that he has talked about turning the American military on the American people. He has talked about going after people who are engaged in peaceful protest. He has talked about locking people up because they disagree with him. This is a democracy.
So, Carrie, Kamala Harris claimed Donald Trump plans to use the military against Americans, going after peaceful protesters and locking up his opponents. She also laid the southern border crisis on Donald Trump. Tell me your reaction to those comments.
Sometimes when I listen to her, I feel like I'm on planet crazy. I mean, this is exactly what this administration, the current administration, has done. They've weaponized our own government against the people. And no one has been more victimized by that than President Donald Trump. I mean, we've seen these bogus indictments and convictions, and the DOJ coming after him, raiding his home. This is absurd, what I'm hearing. And this administration is pushing against our First Amendment rights. They want to censor us. This is a woman who wants to take away our Second Amendment rights and wants to do mandatory gun buybacks. This is absurd. She needs to look in the mirror, because she's actually talking about herself when she says what she just said.
Now, recently you participated in a debate for the Arizona Senate race with Ruben Gallego. What were you able to reveal about your opponent to voters during that debate?
Well, I wish I would have had 3 hours, to be honest. There's so much of his voting record. He's voted with Kamala Harris and Joe Biden 100% of the time. He's the most radical leftist in the House of Representatives that nobody had ever heard of. So now he's trying to do an extreme makeover and act like he's moderate. You know, he's lied about his past, said he grew up on the south side of Chicago, sleeping on the floor, and that his dad left him when he was 11. That's not even true. He actually grew up in a very upper-class neighborhood near Chicago called Evergreen Park. He didn't tell us that his dad was a convicted felon Mexican drug trafficker. And that matters, because he's voted every step of the way to open up the borders in our country and empower the cartels to funnel drugs into our country and destroy the lives of hundreds of thousands of people. He's lied about every portion of his background, and the media has refused to cover it. It's just unbelievable. He's really a Manchurian candidate. And we need to get more information about his past, the truth about Ruben Gallego out, including the fact that he walked out on his wife when she was 9 months pregnant, served her divorce papers a few days before Christmas, and ran off with a D.C. lobbyist, who now he's pushing all of that lobbyist legislation through Congress.
All right. Now, Joe Biden announced a new $425 million military aid package, Carrie, for Ukraine, as well as a $4.7 billion more in student loan handouts, bringing the total to $175 billion for 4.8 million student loan borrowers. How can this kind of spending continue while our own citizens suffer from natural disasters and issues like inflation and crime?
It's such a slap in the face to Americans. They really must loathe the American citizen to leave us this vulnerable with an open border, to pour more money into a war in Ukraine. This is why I'm so excited to win this seat and go bring some common sense to Washington, D.C. And this is why, frankly, the people of Arizona need to get out and vote early. We have election season. Let's vote early. Make sure you cast your ballot for President Trump. We're going to stop the wars. We're going to bring back security on our streets. We're going to bring back a secure southern border and revive our economy. Vote President Trump in Arizona and U.S. Senate Carrie Lake. And I really appreciate your time today, allowing me on.
Carrie Lake, thank you for joining us today during a busy home stretch for your campaign. Take care.
Thanks.
Tim.
Mike, a man in the United Kingdom was convicted Wednesday of silent prayer outside an abortion clinic, claiming all he did was pray to God. On November 24th, 2022, Adam Smith O'Connor was outside of an abortion clinic in Bournemouth, England, and silently praying for his son Jacob, who was aborted 22 years prior.
They informed me that they considered that my praying for my deceased son was a breach of the PSPO, that it was an act of disapproval of abortion, although I wasn't manifesting that prayer in any way. And if I hadn't told them, they would have had no way of knowing what I was praying about.
The 51-year-old father of two was sentenced to a 2-year conditional discharge, which means he'll only go to jail if he's convicted of future charges in the next 2 years, according to Alliance Defending Freedom UK. Now, the Alliance Defending for Freedom indicated this is the first time for a thought crime conviction in Britain. Greg?
Oh, wow. Before we go, let's talk with Josh Manning from the Western Journal one more time. Josh, the Western Journal is reporting that the FBI quietly corrected crime statistics that were lower than the real numbers. Tell us what you found.
Yeah, this is incredibly damning. The FBI had tried to report that crime was actually down. If you watch the debate between Trump and Harris, Trump made the point that crime is up. She disagreed. Of course, one of the moderators sided with her. Now the FBI has come out and revised the data. It turns out that between 2021 and 2023, there were 80,000 more violent crimes. That includes 1,700 more murders, almost 8,000 more rapes, and about 30,000 more robberies. And let's not forget 37,000 more aggravated assaults. If you compare 2019 and 2023, homicides went up 8.3%. That's by the FBI's numbers. If you go by the CDC's numbers, it was up 20%. And if you look at the Center for Criminal Justice, it was up 18%. I don't know what you can call these other than doctored numbers.
Yeah, but crime is down. That's what they say. Hey, real quick.
Crime is down, yeah.
20 seconds here. Your thoughts on Kamala's interview last night? 20 seconds.
She managed to say absolutely nothing. The only thing that was coherent about what she said were her attacks on Trump, which made no sense and were comprised of lies. This is why they try to keep her out of the public eye, because she embarrasses herself.
All right, be sure to read Josh and his team's reporting every day at westernjournal.com. It's definitely worth your time. It's good to see you again today, Josh. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Greg. We love victory.
Thank you. 877-281-6297, 877-281-6297. The phone number right now. We're a licensed prayer minister ready to pray with you concerning anything. You can pray over the elections. You can pray over your family. You can pray over your dog. You can pray over your neighbors. Whatever it is, you can pray with somebody right now. 877-281-6297. Lord, we thank you for the opportunity that you give us to join with one another each and every day to learn facts about what they're happening, but not necessarily what's going to remain. It's temporal. You are in charge, and we are in line with you. We thank you for that, in Jesus' name. Our thanks to Josh Manning, Carrie Lake, and especially thanks for joining. We're back tomorrow at noon Eastern, 11 Central, with the author of the new Abnormal, Dr. Aaron Kheriaty, and former New York congressional candidate Liz Joy. Make sure you're here as well. The world reports the problem. Victory Channel brings the answer. Whatever is born of God overcomes the world. This is the victory that's overcome the world, our faith. Stay in faith. We'll see you tomorrow. Bye for now.